Awesome. Hey, everyone. So excited to have everyone here. I'll just do a quick round of intros. I'm Akanksha Hazari. I'm the founder and CEO of LoveLocal. With us for this exciting panel, which is about seed to scale, leading the AI revolution. We have Harshjit here, who's the MD of Peak 15 Ventures. We have Sanjay Nath here, who's the co-founder and partner of Blume Ventures. And we have Aakash here, who's the MD of Z47 or Z47. I think we have a really exciting conversation. So to kick off and give context, I'm going to ask all three of you to share. How many AI investments have you made to date? How much have you invested in AI? And what percentage of your funds have you earmarked for future AI investments broadly?
I can start. So as a firm, we probably made between 20 to 30 AI investments. A lot of it will skew to the early stage, so seed. Capital deployed will be a few $100 million because we've done a few large growth checks. And if I was a betting man, I'd say for our early stage business, maybe half or more would be deployed in AI, and it'd be low a little bit for our growth stage business.
Awesome. Sanjay?
Akanksha, before I get to that, I just want to say thanks. It's wonderful to be here. I'm originally a Bombay boy, so it's wonderful to be speaking on AI in Mumbai. We are a slightly smaller fund, we're early stage, so we've done, I would say, invested about 25, 30 million in AI so far. Almost everything in SaaS is also being broadening to AI, so add all of that up. I would say about 10 or 12 investments so far. And Atomic Work is one that all three of us are part of the cap table, so it's an interesting one. And yeah, we're very bullish on the space, and I would say of the half of the sort of built in India for the world, at least 60-75% would be into AI.
Awesome.
No, I think similar vein, roughly triple-digit million across multiple investments. Similar 15-odd companies in the last 4 years now. So we started around that mark. On the earmark question, I have a very interesting bit, which takes me back to my foundership days. Back then, venture capital in India used to be mobile teams and web teams, right? And hence, that's not a concept today. It shouldn't ever have been a concept. I think it's the same thing. So when you think of saying earmarking towards AI, if you actually draw the arc forward and think of it 2 years from now, 3 years from now, I don't think that's a question. I don't think even it's a concept of saying how much are you earmarking for AI, because very frankly, if you, as a company existing or a new upstart, you are not an AI native company, you are potentially just getting left behind.
Awesome. And picking up on that note, so Sanjay, I know that you spend time between India and the US for Blume. So I'm just going to share some numbers to put this question in context. So far, obviously, data sources, some variance between data sources, but broadly, the US so far has invested $300 billion in AI. And Apple actually 3 days ago just announced that they're investing $500 billion in AI. China has just announced setting up a $8.2 billion investment fund for AI. And Alibaba alone in China has earmarked or is investing $53 billion in AI. Comparatively, India so far has invested $1.42 billion in AI. We are definitely lagging in terms of capital and our investments. You obviously spend time between the US and India. Why do we have such a huge gap, and what do you see the role of investors and VCs in bridging this massive capital gap?
Sure. No, it's a great question. I think this is a question that also connects capital and talent together. If you think about the US or Silicon Valley, the reason that happens is, I know Harsh next to me is a Stanford alum. A lot of that research and the kickstart happens around universities, where this talent comes out from. So the question is not, how far behind, but are we bridging that gap? A couple of things have very positive, I think, for India. You see, Satya from Microsoft coming here. You see Jensen. I think they're visiting because they believe they're investing a lot in R&D. And typically, most of that talent has been, I would say, on the corporate R&D side. The question is really, are you seeing, foundation models and startups, the talent flowing from corporates into the startup world? So yes, I think we're very early in that stage, but the fact that India and the Valley are so well connected, I think the question is that, how, will the bridge, will the gap reduce? And we are seeing positive elements. I think what we have to do is increase the linkages between universities, and we've got some great universities right here, from IIT Bombay to VGT and so many. I think we have to have, talent also from the US coming back, and to have a cross-border flow of talent is going to drive more capital. So yes, it's early days, and hopefully that the gap should reduce.
So picking up on, you mentioned research. I think the fundamental question that's been talked about linked to research is, where is India's DeepSeek? Where is India's ChatGPT? Why did we miss the boat? Why aren't we even part of this conversation?
Yeah. I think there are, a few attempts on the foundation model side in India. I sit on the board of a company called Sarvam, which is trying to build Indic language models. There are a few others in the space. But I think the fundamental challenge is the lack of, research talent that's available in India, right? So I think those who spend time in the US, there is a very strong push for research in universities, even at some of the large companies. You spoke about Apple, Google, Meta. They all have research groups that are very large, very well played, and that's sort of where some of the innovation comes from. I don't think we have a similar level of focus on research. I think there was an interesting debate a few weeks back saying, our IT services companies have, produced hundreds of billions of dollars in return, which have been given back to shareholders, but what percentage of that has gone into fundamental research? And I feel like unless there's a repivoting across the spectrum from educational institutions all the way to large corporates, if you don't have that, do research, come up with breakthroughs, and you figure out the commercial model after, I don't think we're going to sort of see as many breakthroughs from India.
And it's interesting because the IITs were literally created with keeping in mind that we wanted to continue to focus on research. So I'm going to come to you picking up on that, Aakash. Our investors, you as investors, our VCs, are you willing to invest in companies that have no line of sight to revenue? Are you willing to invest in companies that are doing R&D effectively at this stage? Because that's what an emerging industry and excellence in deep tech or new tech requires. It requires capital. And like you said, we're not doing it in our labs. So do you as a VC feel you have a role in that? And how do you think about it? How does that 47 think about it?
Yeah, so the thought around it is much simpler, right? And I think I've quoted this question multiple times. Having been a founder twice, been a founding member twice more, then built a large $500 million plus business, and now doing investing. I think this question is slightly redundant, right? And having been on both sides, I can sort of vouch for it. And even on the IITB side, dropped out from IIT Bombay. The challenge is, if you think of what is required, like that question when founders come and step up and say, oh, I'm building as an entrepreneur. You call yourself an entrepreneur, right? How can you not be chasing an economic outcome, right? No entrepreneur should never not chase economic outcome, right? Now, even the question around deep tech is not a question of saying, is there a market or not? In deep tech, the risk is the R&D and the product risk that a venture capital and a founder takes. The market already exists. The markets are much more proven. In deep tech, you're not taking a market risk, right? Even when our colleagues have done Sarvam, we have invested in Krutrim, we are not taking a market risk. We are taking a product risk, right? So economic PMF, every venture goes through 3 stages, right? You have product PMF, you have scalable PMF, you have scalable profitable PMF, right? How can you not have line of sight of the third? And if you are the founder of thinking and complaining about that, oh, India does not do this, we do not fund research, you don't have the right agency.
Akanksha, can I just add to that? I think that's a great point. There are 2 Indias, right? There is the consumer internet, which you're building as a founder, and then there's the AI side, which can be applied, of course, to consumer enterprise. On the consumer side, the question always is, what's the path to profitability? And here you're asking, is there a line of sight to revenue? I think we are a little far away. Yesterday, a couple of days ago, we just saw this OpenAI, Meera Murati. She's launched her venture, and she's raised $1 billion at a $9 billion valuation, right? Now, we are far from that. But having said that, I think if I look at the case of Atomic, where we all invested, I think what we are looking for entrepreneurs is, how are they thinking about the use cases? What are they trying to take, and how will AI solve the problem? And is there a line of sight of how the revenue model is going to look like? They may have zero revenues today, but how are they thinking about it? How big can this become? If they're able to displace the service now in Atomic's case, what will that revenue model look like? So it is more how they're thinking about it versus having the answers today, because
And that's a common one that we share, right? So just to highlight that one again is checkers versus chess, right? Most people, when they go down to this question, they're talking checkers. One step, one step, one step. The best founders are playing chess. They're thinking through that, hey, this plays out this way, then this is what I do. But they are commercial as F from the day zero.
Got it. Okay, so picking up on this now, research, the fundamental question, I'd love to have all of you answer this question. Is India going to play in building foundational models or in application? Where do you think the story is for India?
I think if you ask me sort of sheer number of companies, it's going to be in the application layer. That would be my answer. I think we will have a few foundation model investments. And I think for reasons of, sovereignty, for sensitive applications, there will be a use case to have, LLMs from India. But if you think about sort of, where might most entrepreneurs play, I would say in the application layer. That would be my guess.
Okay.
Yeah, I will sort of overlay a overarching theme. I think the world of geopolitics, and you talked about AI sovereignty and tech, have never been as closely linked as before. We're seeing, changes every day. There's something interesting happening from the US, and people are saying that, okay, this is not just tech, but it's also a matter of also. Having said that, I think the market is big enough for all these models. So around foundational models, there'll be a lot of opportunities for application layer. And we have not taken a position as yes in foundation models, but it's very, very early days, and I think there'll be a lot of interplay between those.
I think across the stack, there'll be enough opportunities. As Harsh said, that you have to contextualize it with the market that you play in, right? Now, even when we go out and invest in foundational models, or let's say foundation models, data center, ASICs, energy, anything much lower in the stack, a big question all of us as investors and founders have to think about is what's the scale and what's the P&L profile of the businesses we sell to, right? It's very different from our peers who have to sell to businesses in the US, right? You're talking about an economy which is multifold smaller. The P&L economics are very different. So yes, we do worry about it. I think, hence, intuitively, fewer of those, far fewer bets around that from the ecosystem. Very risky still. There is a path, but path to profitability is questionable. Path to revenue is surely there. More of applied. So applied AI and application has always sort of been a core muscle for the ecosystem in East, not just India. I think that will just play out. We saw it play out in the cloud era. We saw it play out in the first consumer internet era. The same thing will play out.
So I'm just going to push you guys a little bit on this. So I'm going to take a company that Blume Ventures is invested in. It's the space company. I've forgotten the... Pixel. India SpaceX. Now, this is a sector that you have private sector crossing over into government sector and into security and national security interests. Now, we have defense. I don't know in your portfolios if you have anything that you've invested that's adjacent to defense or anything that's public sector and actually has national security, for example, as part of that, reality of that investment. Can we afford not to have foundational models of our own for investments and use foreign foundational models when you're going into, like you said, a space that is now bordering a geopolitical issue with the fact is the underlying data leads to a data security issue. So can we afford not to have our own models if we really want to be a country that's powered by AI versus a country that just invests in AI? All of you can answer that one.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think we need to have our own models. I don't think there's a, and that was sort of our fundamental thesis when we invested in Sarvam, that there will be local models. There is a view to take that OpenAI has raised hundreds of billions of dollars, and so, why should there be another attempt? Will you be able to catch up? But I do agree with you that for, sovereignty reasons for sensitive applications, it is important and imperative that, we have our own models where we are able to, see the supply chain of the entire stack. We know what data is trained on, we know who's training it, we know where the GPUs sit, we know sort of, how to use a model at scale. That being said, the question is, if you look at consumer AI applications, or you think about companies that sell software to global enterprises, they will eventually pick the best model. They'll pick the model that works best for the use cases. They may pick, a proprietary model from OpenAI. They may pick an open source model like DeepSeek. They may pick for, Indic language use cases. They may pick something from India. But I think they will be purveyors of choice in the sense they will pick what sort of works for their use case. And that's going to be a free market. But I do think for sensitive applications in the government, for banks, for others, there will be an opportunity for local companies.
I don't know how different that question would be for people sitting in Nigeria or Pakistan, right? So I think it's the same question everywhere. And I think it's better left for public policy and everyone to philosophize and try forecasting that. Our job as investors and entrepreneurs is very different, right? Our job as entrepreneurs and investors is to actually create value as much as we can, given the constraints, right? And I think I typically tell this to most founders, what's the difference between a CEO and a founder? A founder generates resources, right? So even when it comes to the question of saying, oh, should this be done? Hey, if you're passionate about it, generate the resources to do it, right? Don't expect the world to give you the resources, right? So if you want to build these foundational stuff, you want to go after security, whatever, generate the resources. Because the environment you are in, that you were provided, the lottery that you got, is the lottery you've been dealt, right? Within that lottery, play it, if you can. As an investor, I would always want to seek value, where I can generate my MOIC returns. If it aligns, great. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
I'll just add to that. By the way, thanks. I wouldn't expect anything else from you. You're pushing the panel as a not former, but competitive tennis player, tennis champ. So, I'll also share a shift that's happened, how our government is thinking about deep tech. And this is interesting. We talked about atomic work, we have Pixel, we have ethereal machines together. The first, I'll share this on stage. One of the first companies Karthik and I saw was this wonderful company out of IIT Bombay called IdeaForge. This is years ago. And it is an anti-portfolio to us because they were selling entirely to the government. And we said, can you really build a deep tech company that's selling? And if you look at how the government and initiatives have become consumer today, it's amazing. Pixel, is a strategic partner. Ethereal Machines is partnering with them. I just saw a tweet yesterday where they've commissioned, I think the Karnataka government has just commissioned a massive land project where they're going to make these machines. The point here is that it's become a strategic. I absolutely agree with Aakash when the best founders have to find the best market and make the best choices. But having said that, I think the Indian government and the domestic market is become a huge consumer. It's both from a strategic point of view, they actually are paying, and you don't have to worry about accounts receivable. I have not said hello to Akrit here, but I know as the head of AI, he was with Modi ji just now on some foreign trips. I mean, it's really interesting how tech and AI has been integrated into the fabric of the government. So that's a huge change.
But Sanjay, even on IdeaForge, I don't know if it was an anti-portfolio from a timeline and IRR perspective, right? It played out as an outcome, but as an investor, potentially it wasn't, right? So there is a timing and a market which has to play out.
So picking up on this now, this crossover between public and private, I'm going to keep pushing on this. What about data provenance? Now, the backbone of AI is data, and data provenance is considered the possible kryptonite of AI, effectively. We're talking about data privacy, personal data. These are laws that have been passed in the tech space already in India, including the fact that Indian data needs to be hosted in data centers that sit on Indian soil. So how do you balance that? And regulation in India is very, very nascent. It's nascent globally. Europe has started to regulate AI a little bit. So what if regulation comes in, and how do we balance data privacy, personal data, and effectively data provenance with a desire to move forward as rapidly as possible in technology development and AI? And all of you can take this question if you like. Harshjit, you want to kick off?
Sure.
An easy one.
An easy one.
Sorry, I'll just add, I think you're invested in Cloud Physician.
Yeah,
or you're
that's right.
invested in Cloud Physician. Again,
Yeah.
healthcare. healthcare has a lot of personal and sensitive data in it.
Yeah.
You know, so that would be a great kind of example to put it in context.
Yeah, I think there's a few different aspects of the question, right? So there is the first aspect, which is, regulation in AI and, how will that evolve? Um, I think we have to sort of strike the right balance between being too early to regulate, because, if you asked us, even as VCs, like if you ask me to predict, which are going to be the biggest 5 areas or biggest 5 companies, a few years out, I don't know, because, the models will keep evolving and we'll figure out sort of, which companies really manage to crack through, and what they actually build. So we have to be careful to not over-regulate. I know that there's a lot of angst in Europe because of the regulation, so it's a little bit of this balance that needs to be struck between coming up with regulation or not. And I'll leave that to government officials. On data privacy, I think there's 2 ways to solve for it. I mean, you can solve for it through technology, or you can solve for it through regulation, right? So whatever you do on the edge, and now with models like what's possible with DeepSeek and others, they are essentially able to run on the edge, which means if they can run on your device without sort of needing to connect to a cloud somewhere, they are able to process your request without needing to send your data somewhere else. And so I think that's a technological way of solving for privacy. And then there is a regulatory way, which is to say what data can foundation model train on, not train on, who can use this data and all of that. So I think we'll probably see a combination of both, but tech can also solve for some of the privacy issues.
Okay. Do you guys want to add to that?
No, nothing specific. I think don't look forward to Europe. That's it.
You
Don't look up to Europe.
I'll just very briefly touch upon it. It is a question, and therefore, as investors and entrepreneurs, there's also an opportunity. I think everything around security and compliance. I mean, in the cross-border context, we have a company called Sprinto that looks at HIPAA and SOC 2. Similarly, in India, I think it's a great opportunity for founders to look, saying that we know it's a concern, and in fintech you have it with fraud detection, anti-money laundering, and it's a big opportunity to go after from a founder point of view.
So obviously, I think some of you have been here at least some of the day. Obviously, we've got a lot of great partnerships in the works with the government, and the government is very engaged in this conversation. If you had to ask the government for one thing from a regulatory point of view or anything, what's your ask from the government of India as with respect to AI?
I'd like to see the government and associated, government-owned enterprises be bigger buyers of technology. I think, what Palantir and others have shown is that, you can build a large company serving the government, and I think if some of these enterprises cut the red tape, allowed for, Indian startups to be able to sell to them more effectively, I think we would see more companies attempt that and be able to be successful.
Got it. Sanjay?
No, absolutely. I think becoming customers, which we're already seeing, like in Pixel's own case, partners and supporters. And I would say from a regulation point of view, I can't say no regulation, but I'd say very clear guardrails for regulation and not constantly changing, irrespective of states and let's say changing regimes. Just a lot of clarity.
Okay. Single AI, very clear, single, stable AI framework, so to speak. Got it. Aakash?
Our regulators have done a half-decent job till now in most domains. Hope to see that continue. And thankfully in AI, we haven't heard the regulatory chatter. Best to keep it that way.
Got it. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit. You are only allowed to invest in a single thesis in AI for the next 10 years. What's the thesis you're investing in for the next 10 years of your fund? Single thesis in AI.
That's a tough one because, as investors, we react to ideas that founders come up with, so we don't come up with ideas ourselves. But if I had to guess, particularly wearing my, hat of what we can see from India, I think the service as a software thesis is the one that I would be most excited by. We have a rich history and a large services industry. Many of these industries will change dramatically with AI, and it would be great if the avant-garde of the change is from India, where they're able to take the know-how of how things have been done, add what's possible through AI, and then come up with sort of a new model to serve customers. If you ask me, services software, basically, whether it is BPOs, KPOs, IT services, come up with new models where you are able to serve customers cheaper, better, faster, using AI, but also having human in the loop. where you're able to come up with an end-to-end product or solution for your customers that works for them.
Okay. Sanjay?
This is very interesting. I mean, ideally, you could have like got us in different rooms and asked us this question, but in a sense, it's the third wave, right? You know, we had offshoring and services about 30 years ago, and then you had product innovation, and now AI is bringing services back to the fore. I think the larger customer shift is, Mark Benioff at Salesforce says himself that I think 70% of their own customer support is being done by agentic, AI transformation. So I think India's right to win has very much been in talent and services, and this is a great opportunity to, play into agentic, AI transformation, but also add the services layer. And I think that, looking at everyone in the room in Mumbai and India is a huge opportunity to combine those two.
Okay.
So I think entire fund, all of us should get fired. As a fund manager, you shouldn't be doing that. But
Now you have to.
so that's a cardinal sin. But on the question on the slightly different view, I think everything that we hear around services and going after the labor market, all great opportunities. What I would be most excited about is when you see these shifts happen on platforms, right? And now you can almost think of LLMs and foundation models being like a new OS platform. Whenever these shifts happen, the largest outcomes in our world, in the venture ecosystem, get created then, right? The last time the shift happened was with mobile. That's when you got Airbnb, that's when you got Uber, that's when you got multiple other companies. Even Instagram is one of those examples. For the last decade or so, consumer venturing and investing, globally and in India, consumer tech, has broadly been very dominant in, right? I think I would be most excited about backing founders who are able to think, and again, not just another chatbot, like that's the nth one you could try and do, but ones who could potentially really, and again, not a thesis, truly founders first, founder shows the path, but the thought is, if you can think of how the UX and the CX changes with this shift, and I don't think anyone has paid attention to that. Few founders are trying to. Those are going to be generational companies, way bigger than trying to create one more software or services business.
Got it. So I'm going to pick up on your thesis here. And Satya Nadella said that AI is going to kill SaaS. So all of you are investors in SaaS companies. Your 10-year thesis apparently is in SaaS and services. What does it mean for SaaS companies? And following on from that, are your AI investments today going to kill some of the earlier companies you have in your portfolio? Are they going to cannibalize them or kill them?
I can start. I think it's interesting, AI is perhaps the most consensus thesis there is ever. So it's not like, in previous eras, you would have a resistance from incumbents to move to the new tech, right? Like, if you were moving on-prem to cloud, they'd be like, well, on-prem really works, cloud model is not, So there's always been this hesitation. I think AI is the most consensus view anywhere in the world. And so we've seen many of our companies and larger public SaaS companies quickly try to build stuff on software. Now, I think to the extent that a new company is basically taking what folks have and adding a layer of AI that is possible for the incumbent to do, I think it's hard to see how a new company wins. I think the incumbent has a distribution. But if you're able to fundamentally change how something is done, if you're basically re-architecting the product focused on the solution now with the capability of AI, I think that's when there's some real innovator's dilemma, and we'll see that. So to answer your question, I don't think it's the end of SaaS, but I do think that some SaaS companies will get disrupted. Those that adopt will be able to make more money because the whole thing with AI is that market size expanded. Right? You've gone from just selling workflow to selling the work. So it's both software spend and labor spend. And so I think some of the software companies will get even larger, and then some will die.
So adapt or die, basically.
Yeah, I'd say as investors, we have two buckets, right? One is the SaaS investments we've made in the last 5-10 years that have to pivot or transition to AI. And the other is, I feel that the founders building in a AI first, AI native, right today itself have an advantage because they're building in this new age. I think in the earlier category of companies, one could say that Of course, product differentiation was very important, but go-to-market and distribution reach were very important, right? It was all about scale and execution risk. I think if you're building in the AI-first world today, you have to think about those use cases very carefully. The product has to be, I mean, world-class, right? We're talking about companies who want to be, I mean, you know, my advice to folks here is you want to build the world's best AI product, not Mumbai's or India's best, which means you have to be very close to the customer. So in that sense, you know, if you can think about use cases, Harsh talked about integrating workflows into it. You have to almost build all of that at once, right? You can't build the product and then say, you know, I'll get to a 1 million ARR and then go ahead and sell it. You have to think about that from the get-go.
Do you want to add anything?
So SaaS is slightly wider, right? So I think if you go through the spectrum at, you know, extreme left would be simple persistent storage CRUD apps, which are basically some people wanting to charge for few lines of code, wanting to capitalize it forever, basically just doing what email plus Excel does. Those probably potentially would die. On the other end of the spectrum, you also have companies like Snowflake and deeper infras, much wider, much core pieces, right? That continues, right? In the middle is this slightly hazy, fuzzy zone where in SaaS, already we have been seeing over the last few years, thanks to a lot of venture activity, last 15 years, every VC just wanted to go behind SaaS. A, already it's over competitive, right? B, besides, you know, dislodging incumbents or peers, I would think the bigger force is going to be the build versus buy debate. Because as you continue to bring down the time and cost of making things yourself, a lot of stuff where people had to today buy outside because they could not chalk out their developer bandwidth for something which was not core to them, that potentially does get at risk. It is going to be upon founders in that middle zone to find their footing in terms of saying, how do I ensure that there is actual deep value beyond just solving for time for the customer I was selling to, right? Because for every dollar spent in SaaS, 1.8x is spent in implementing it. Furthermore, in trying to train people to use it, and having been purchaser of SaaS multiple times, it is most likely 70% utilized, 60% utilized than what the founder or the team are trying to sell me, right? So it is already hazy. You have a big force to fight against. Like right now, just an example, I'm trying to move away from having a CRM, right? We as VCs also have to use CRMs. We are completely not looking out for anyone, right? We have smart people in the team who are now trying to actually put the entire agentic orchestration for our work fully internally, right? I do expect that's going to be a tussle, but the larger, deeper infra companies, if you're solving for pub subs, which help large companies run, you're solving for Snowflake, you're solving for CDPs, those exist, those will continue. So that part of the SaaS is always golden.
So I'm going to pick up on this theme of talent. Now, a problem that India has had is that we have very smart Indians and then they don't build in India. We have a classic brain drain problem, and this has definitely happened in the earlier massive tectonic shifts that have happened, right? So all the companies that we use, Google Maps, Google, it's built by Indians sitting out of Silicon Valley. We're sitting at the birth of now a new massive technical step forward. How do we ensure we don't have a brain drain again? How do we make sure that talent stays here, the really, really smart talent stays here, and people who need to really quickly upskill themselves so that we have the best talent in the world? We want to be the services backbone of the AI services backbone of the world requires us to significantly upskill ourselves very, very rapidly. So I think two parts to this question. One is, can we prevent the brain drain when it comes to AI, and how do we do it? And the second is, what do we as a country need to do? What does every single person in this room need to think about to make sure they're still relevant and competitive in an AI world? So maybe you can take the first one and you can take the second one. I have a third one for you as well.
So I guess on, the reason why we've always had a shift of founders going from India primarily to the US is because, I mean, their economy is 8 to 10 times larger than ours. And if you are a founder that wants to build the largest possible company, you will go to the largest possible market. The question is now, where do you build the team? There are companies like the Infosys and TCS of the world that have sort of kept the HQ here, even though a lot of their business comes from the US. And then there are companies, let's say, like the Freshworks that have a large center here, but have the founder and team sitting there, right? So the question is, which model will we adapt to? I do think that founders will go after the global market, and so the back and forth will continue. The question is, where's HQ? And that will depend a little bit on, one, the level of talent that's available for folks to hire. And then two, if we are able to be on the cutting edge of what's going on and people are able to be globally competitive while sitting in India, I think that will enable them to do that. But if, people feel that requiring success of their company, needs them to move, then I think we've sort of lost the battle. So we have to be on the cutting edge.
Got it. Sanjay, on the upskilling part.
Yeah, I would say, we have to be prepared that we are, living in we're all global citizens. We're living in a global world. You look at the flight between Mumbai and New York or Mumbai and San Francisco, you'll see familiar faces, which is a good thing because I think talent has to flow both ways to learn there and learn here, right? I mean, learning is happening everywhere. Having said that, I think these, we are also funding global companies. Not everyone has to be there. The reason you're there is because you want to be close to your customers, find out what use cases you're going to massively transform. But I think we talked about this earlier in the panel, that's where corporates and corporates and the government and startups have to partner. We need corporates actually paying better salaries. We talked about this. The reason many of your talent stays on there is because they get paid better, and that's what we need to see shifting. And if that happens, you'll certainly see a shift. But it's not, that a company is an Indian company or an American company. You're going to have more globally distributed companies, which is a good thing, I feel.
Okay, so this is going to be the last question to wrap up this session, which I think has been really interesting. And I think it's interesting to a lot of people in this audience. A lot of people in this audience are probably thinking of starting up and becoming a founder of an AI company. So I'd like to know, starting with you, what are the top 3 things you're looking for in a founding team or founders when you're looking at investing in an AI company today?
So I typically like to do a quick exercise around this, right? How many of you over here know how to code, basic coding? How many of you here have actually ever written a persistent storage CRUD app? How many of you who don't know how to code, who did not raise hand for the second question, have tried using any of the AI tools right now to solve for yourself? How many of you have built more than 3 or 4 applets on Replit? That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for agency and taste, right? So on the brain drain question, I think the biggest thing that we all need to be cognizant of is that is exactly what is getting normalized, right? And in a world, and very recently Mark Anderson, compared everything happening in AI to almost saying this is like the philosopher's stone. And for anyone who's been a student of science, we've studied about it, read about it, right? Exactly that's what's happening. And in that world, nothing beats high agency and high taste, right? Today, the best founders are racing up to, earlier we were talking about monetization, the best AI companies are racing to triple-digit million ARR way faster than we have ever seen companies race to that mark, right? We need to stop making excuses. We need to have high agency, and at least that's what I look for. I purely, both us, me and as a firm, we are truly founders first. We only go and want to work with the best founders. High agency, high taste.
Sanjay?
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful word, agency. We're seeing that being used more and more. It's really important. It's more important than skills or knowledge. So I would definitely agree with that. I'd say two more things. I think one is, the today's youth has a big advantage of operating and learning and being in the AI first age versus there's nothing to unlearn, right? They're learning versus a lot of other folks have to, transition from SaaS to AI or unlearn all the other models. So that's wonderful. I would say, just be fast learners, soak in. The other is our founders have a deep understanding. Do they have a deep understanding of how, why they're building an AI, how it's going to change the customer, what customer they're going for, and if your solution can truly change the customer's mindset using AI, then that's what you look for versus saying, I'm building an AI company in this vertical or that vertical. I really want to understand why they thought about this and what, is it a vitamin or a painkiller and how it will truly solve the customer's problem. So I think agency combined with these two aspects.
Harshjit?
A similar answer. I think for me, it's about team and insight. So team is the only constant when you build a startup. Those are the people, tech will change, and, it's about, who are the people who are able to adapt to that, what kind of talent they're able to bring on. So that matters immensely. And the second is insight, right? Like what do you believe that is sort of, either not commonplace, others have not tried before, others will not try until you, are able to prove it out. So do you have something compelling or novel that will allow you to succeed in a world that is going to conspire to not let you succeed? So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for this panel. I think it was really interesting.
Thanks.
I really appreciate your frank conversations.
Thank
and
you.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a very, very insightful panel. Next
Request,
up,
we're just going to do a selfie here, and when we click, I want everyone to just say or shout Mumbai.